Your thoughts on Tez Johnson, a really fun name to watch this week.
I don't think Tez touches the ground when he runs. This is like a Sindarin elf. He just glides over the turf. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah, and that's why the NFL doesn't care about weight so much anymore, is because the change of direction skills you get, the speed, it's just like, well, if you can't get hands on him, it doesn't matter how big he is, right? So, yeah, he's got to land in a scheme that's going to protect his size a little bit, but you've seen guys like that have tons of success recently. Not worried about that at all. He's another one where it's like one-on-one drills galore. He's just going to kill everyone.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
A lot of NFL fans view the NFL Draft Combine as the start of draft season, but the Senior Bowl keeps getting bigger and bigger, not only in the terms of the number of eyes on it, but in terms of the number of players they're churning out every single season that get selected in the NFL Draft. Last year, 43% of the draft started out in Mobile. 43% of the players drafted in the NFL Draft participated in the Senior Bowl. I'm Theo Gremminger here with Brett Whitefield of Fantasy Points, and we're going to take a look at some players that we have our eyes on at the Senior Bowl that you need to know for fantasy football. Brett, how much do you love the Senior Bowl as an evaluative tool that you just can't replace in the process of the NFL Draft?
Yeah, so every year I do a Senior Bowl primer that will be out on FantasyPoints.com. In that primer, I always tell a story of anecdotes. And one of the things I think is interesting is people's Senior Bowl takes are always heavily scrutinized. It's like, are we throwing out 4 years of tape for 3 days of practice? And there is a balance to be had for sure. What I really look for, though, with the Senior Bowl is like, they're going to get into a situation where situationally it's a different environment. If you're a wide receiver, you're playing with a quarterback you've never played with before. How you adjust in those moments matters to me because I get to see what that transition. It's a little tiny glimpse into how a transition into an NFL environment is going to look like. New playbook, new nomenclature and lingo, new quarterback and timing. Everything's different. So I like to see guys respond to that well. You get to see how they respond to coaching, right? Like some of these coaches aren't necessarily friendly. They're not friendly on purpose because they want to push players and see where they go. Great story, Alan Lazard, the year he was coming out of the Senior Bowl, man, he was just getting torn up by the coaches, but he responded very well. And he didn't get heavy draft capital, but you've seen him have a pretty long career despite that lack of draft capital. And I think it's a testament to him because he responded to coaching really well, showed that he was a team player and could handle that coaching. And then the last thing is like a lot of guys, like the college offense especially, is wonky, dude. Like there are a lot of weird systems that don't translate to the NFL. Guys are asked to do things like, that they'll never be asked to do in the NFL. Furthermore, they're not asked to do things that they will be asked to do in the NFL. So when they get to the Senior Bowl, that's an opportunity for these guys to showcase different skills that they didn't get to showcase in college. The anecdote I always go to is Terry McLaurin, man. Coming from that last year at Ohio State to the Senior Bowl, he was basically a screen guy, a jet sweep guy, this real gadget-heavy player, the occasional 9-ball. You literally never saw him running routes on, routing up DBs. You never saw him being a go-to receiver, like a true X guy. You never saw him get pressed. He went to the Senior Bowl, Theo, and just annihilated every cornerback there. With route running, you're like, where was this for 4 years? This is insane. And so I think those are the moments where it's like, I'm not throwing out 4 years of tape, but I'm adding to the story, right? Terry showed me something I didn't get to see in those 4 years of college tape. And so I can then, kind of start to weave that into my evaluation of him a little bit. And so I had a second round grade on Terry, for example, because of some of those skills he showcased at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you're certainly one of the best out there in terms of evaluating tape, in terms of looking at prospects and breaking them down. For me, I'm very fantasy driven, and I love when we get a chance to see these guys pop at the Senior Bowl because I think it gives us an idea of the guys who are going to pop for us on our fantasy football rosters. Last year, Ladd McConkey shows up to the Senior Bowl, is completely unguardable, looks insane as a route runner. Even like the little one-on-one drills, it's like, oh my God, this guy is ridiculous. He ends up being a 15-point per game scorer. Marshawn Lloyd shows up, and it was a draft class where the running back spot had a lot of question marks, and Marshawn Lloyd certainly answered a number of them, ends up being a third-round pick. Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette show up, have strong weeks, and both of those guys end up in the first round. And then the quarterback spot we're going to talk about briefly. So for me, it's like everybody kind of knows the guys who are going to be top 45 picks. A
Right.
few guys will break in there when it comes to skill positions, but I'll know pretty much a lot more about the day 2 selections that become an overwhelming majority of our dynasty rosters, and also guys we have our eyes on in redraft for the next season. So I think for me, it is very much the draft does start in Mobile. That's a term that they use, but it's very true. And then back to what you said, like even when you're watching an SEC game, a big time Big Ten game, like some of these receivers are going up against non NFL cornerbacks at the Senior Bowl. Those drills, very likely they're going up against another potential pro. So I do think you get a better evaluation from like your end as well. So we're super excited about it. Stick with us here at Fantasy Points. We're going to cover everything you need heading all the way up to the NFL draft and then your dynasty rookie drafts afterwards. Brett's going to break down a ton for us today as well. Got to start out at the quarterback spot though, Brett. This is a class where you start looking at the mock drafts. I know my initial mock draft 1.0 probably would have gotten you a little heated because I only had 2 quarterbacks in that first round. Shadur Sanders, who's actually headed to the Shrine Bowl, and Cam Ward. And that's, I would say, not necessarily the overwhelming majority, but I'd say more than half of mock drafts right now are only projecting 2 quarterbacks in the first round. Last year, the Senior Bowl gave us Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., and sort of both of those guys got there, and they weren't like the talk of the town, but they were guys that looked like pros, continued their rise all the way through the NFL draft, and ended up both being top 12 selections. Now, when we look at this year's class, there's a few quarterbacks in Mobile that have a chance to be the QB3 overall. And I'll ask you this, is Jaxson Dart the QB3 in the NFL draft?
No. You know why? Because he's the QB too.
There you go. There you go.
Let's go. Yeah, no, I love Jaxson Dart, man. And yeah, there's debate to be had on him or Cam Ward. It kind of just depends what you like. For me, you know, we know all the QB-centric things I like. I talk about it on the First Read podcast ad nauseum. People are probably sick of it. But with Dart, you're getting a vertical passing skill set that rivals none in this class for sure. You know, maybe Jayden Daniels level. That offense is similar to what Jayden Daniels did. That's what I've been telling people is if you like what Jayden Daniels did last year coming out at LSU, Jaxson Dart is going to be your flavor for sure. Now, he's not the runner Jayden Daniels is, obviously, but as far as the quick decision making, the ability to push the ball outside the numbers downfield, attack all 3 levels, he's got some creative playmaking ability with those legs. Really nice throwing mechanics that are consistent, really accurate thrower. And then he's got some off-platform ability with his arm too. Not quite Cam Ward, but he's got some off-platform ability. He can do some fun things with the arm. And so I think Dart's a really good player, really sound. I think the holes in his game give me just a little bit more confidence than versus a guy like Cam Ward, who I like, but I don't like quite on that level.
Yeah, definitely I'd say Jaxson Dart is one that could certainly rise up. This is one where we talked about him during the season. You've actually been on him for over a year, and he looked really good the last time we saw him. And I know it was a bowl game, and not everybody plays in the bowls, but he makes some absolutely ridiculous throws. Pop in the Duke tape. There's a one where he's going like towards the sideline and like does just a ridiculous downfield throw. It was sort of like almost like a video game type play. So he's got the arm. He's also got the moxie. A lot of swag with Jaxson Dart. The one quarterback who's very polarizing for many, including yourself, I'm probably a little bit higher on than you are, is Jalen Millroe. And the two of us did a super flex mock draft recently, and you didn't even have him in like your top 5 tiers. So for me, Millroe has the mobility, Alabama quarterback. We saw him defeat Georgia. We saw him have some really big time moments during his time at Alabama. Certainly a lot of question marks, though, with this profile. Your thoughts on Millroe and what a big week in Mobile could mean to him?
Yeah, Millroe's running dynamics are elite. There's no question about that. Like so for fantasy, I get why you like him for sure. For me, I'm concerned on the draft capital. If there is a quarterback that kind of comes out of nowhere and gets good draft capital, it will be Millroe just because the raw talent is there, the physical upside. But I do think it's like he has so many holes from a quarterback perspective, and we've seen this archetype really struggle. That Justin Fields, he's got some Caleb Williams in him too, where it's just like the processing is very slow. He holds the ball forever. He's not consistent with his delivery. It's very hard to watch sometimes. The rushing upside, again, is tremendous. So if a team feels like they can turn him into a quarterback, or they have the right system for him to make it easy on him, I could see him going somewhere in the first round. But for me, for my flavor, he's a day 2 kind of player. It's gonna be an uphill battle to get on the field for him. I do think, the player who's going to get comped to the most is going to be Jalen Hurts, I think, because that's about the range, that early second round window. Hurts was so much more developed as a passer than Millroe. It's kind of crazy. So, and I know the Hurts success story might give the NFL a little more optimism with a guy like Millroe, but because Hurts was so much more developed as a passer, Miller is just not quite for me. I'm excited to see him though this week, and that's why I threw him on the list, because like, how is he going to react to the different environment, the new offensive play sheet he's going to have, the new terminology? Typically, when you get a guy like Miller, I think of Malik Willis a couple years back. He checked it down or scrambled on every drop back. And it's like, bro, we know you can do that. And so I want to see Millroe push himself. Like, I know you can go get some with your legs. I know you can check it down. I want to see you get through a progression and rip a backside dig route on a dagger concept or something. So that's but anyways, that's kind of what I'm looking for with Jalen.
Yeah, and with Millroe, I would say that people who are grinding tape, like yourself, like true evaluation, there's holes in the game. But for us in fantasy football, he's very enticing because he's going to run very well in terms of like his 40-yard dash time, and he also has very impressive mobility. The problem is sometimes we get these scrambling quarterbacks and they just can't hold an NFL starting job. So the guy might finish as a QB1 for us one week and then a QB1 for us the next week. And we're like, oh, we've got something. And then all of a sudden they get replaced. So big time pressure on Millroe, and also a guy that I think there'll be a ton of eyes on. The quarterback class is shallow. By most people's accounts, you're projecting 3 quarterbacks to go in the first round. And I think I'm probably with you after hearing you talk so much praise for Dart. I think I'm gonna have to put him in my next mock draft in the first round. But the running back class is one of the best we've ever seen, and certainly over the last 10 years, it's one of the deepest and most productive classes. Has a true alpha at the top in Ashton Genty and a number of other guys we think could be top 40 selections. But what the Senior Bowl has is sort of that next group. Guys who are going to settle in somewhere between, let's call it running back 6 and on. There's guys in this roster for the Senior Bowl that are going to be day 2 selections. And we see it pretty much every year where a guy pushes up into day 2 from the Senior Bowl. Some of them just solidify it. Some of them seemingly come out of nowhere. Let's talk about a few of these players. One player that I think not a lot of people are that well versed in is LeQuint Allen from Syracuse. And Allen's a guy who put up video game numbers this year, led the nation with 64 receptions, also had 16 rushing scores. And the last 2 games were really, really good for him. Syracuse gets the big upset at home, keeps Miami out of the playoffs, and Allen was really good in that game. Followed it up with a really good performance in their bowl game win over Washington State. Your thoughts on LeQuint?
Yeah, I really like this guy. He plays bigger than his size too. I think he's listed at just over 200 pounds. Like he plays big, but he's the most accomplished receiver in this class for running backs, in my opinion. From a route running, not just from a volume standpoint, Theo, but from an actual route running standpoint, what he can do as a pass catcher, it's spectacular. He's got really good burst. He's a really high cut runner. So he's fast, but he's a long strider. My comp for him stylistically is actually Kerryon Johnson. Now, Kerryon had a great start to his career, but the injuries completely derailed him.
Kerryon would have been the man if he stayed healthy for us in fantasy.
Yeah, and I see so much Kerryon in LeQuint's game. It's ridiculous. It's uncanny, actually. So, I really like. I also like that he's proven he can be a bell cow at a smaller size too, right? Like, look at like the last 5 games of 2023 and how he came into 2024. Ridiculous workload. He had multiple games of 30+ touches, never slowed down, never got dinged up, never got hurt. Love that about him.
Another running back who caught a ton of passes in his career, and it's actually not even close. If we listed every single draft running back that we thought would get drafted in the NFL draft, just with terms of career receptions, Woody Marks would lead them all. Guy had 261 receptions. Obviously, COVID helped this out. He gets the extra season, but this is a player where, sort of following the Marshawn Lloyd outcome, guy transfers to USC, plays a single season, goes to the Senior Bowl with a great deal of eyes on him, and potentially performs well and solidifies his draft stock. This is another guy who's going to weigh 200 plus pounds. He's 24 years old. He's sort of a grown man, kind of like Ray Davis was last year, older back, but really, really interesting profile. Finally broke out as a runner this year, had 1,100 rushing yards in the Big Ten, still continued to get receptions. He has a 83 catch season in his career early on at Mississippi State, 47 catches this year. Your thoughts on Woody Marks?
Woody's another guy I'm all over. Love him. He's got a great combination of burst and vision. So when I scout running backs, I have 3 premium traits. It's burst, vision, and ability to create beyond your blockers. He's got the burst and vision down. It's a deadly combo. If he gets a crease, he can hit it, man. He's got legit make you miss moves too in the open field. Like he can break a lot of tackles or force misses. Now he's not an overly physical player. That's going to be the downside with him. He's not going to truck a guy. He's not going to initiate contact. He's not a grind it out, get the tough yards kind of guy. He's more of I think he'll be a change of pace. So for fantasy, this is relevant, right? Because I don't think he'll ever be, unless he lands in the complete right environment, I don't think he'll ever be like a super heavy bell cow type guy. I think at best he's a lead back, and at worst he's a change of pace kind of guy, pass catcher / speed element.
Yeah, I love that, and not every back needs to be a bell cow. This is this has become a league where it's a ton of running back by committees. But I think Woody Marks could end up being a guy we refer to as like a high value touch guy, change of pace back, and also gets reception. So I'm also very intrigued to see him in person. One guy who is an absolute beast is Damien Martinez. This is a guy who's 230. He's 6 feet tall. We've actually been talking about him for a few weeks. When I'm starting to do my evaluation process, I like to hit up Brett, and I'm like, we got to talk a little bit about this Martinez kid. You've actually really been grinding. He was the Pac-12 freshman of the year at Oregon State, ends up transferring to Miami. This season was super, super efficient, over 6 yards a carry, gets 200 receiving yards, and over 1,000 rushing yards. Your thoughts on Martinez?
Martinez is really, really good. In fact, once we get out of that top tier of what Janty, Hampton, and Johnson, he might be my next guy.
Whoa.
I love this dude's skill set, man. He is, the 3 premium traits I mentioned, vision, burst, ability to make guys miss or create beyond your blockers, he's got all 3 of them. He is dynamic with the football. Reminds me of a more polished version of Trey Benson. You're going to see like that size speed combo, great athlete, but he's a way smoother player than Trey Benson was. This guy is fluid in and out of his cuts. The way he reads and sets up blockers is awesome. And I love the diversity in the 2 schools he played at. He got a ton of gap and like counter power type stuff at Oregon State, and Miami had a little bit more outside zone, inside zone. So he's proven he can do it in 2 different schemes. I really do think that's valuable.
I agree. And that's sort of a lot of the archetypes of the guys we're talking about have been at 2 schools. It's the age of NIL, the age of the portal. And we love seeing guys who don't really drop off. You're not necessarily going to hold it against them when they go to a new system and the production diminishes. But Martinez certainly was really, really good. 2 separate schools, big time player. And I love his size. He just looks like a beast that can handle volume. So I am into that profile as well. I would say that the back that has the biggest hive, meaning that there's people who are beyond excited about this player, and there's some people who don't really care about him. But I would say Devin Neal is one where if you're into Devin Neal, you're evoking big time comparisons. He's a guy who's had a ton of production at Kansas, was a Kansas native, ends up staying home. I believe he's actually from Lawrence, goes to Kansas, stays in town, and the production's just been awesome. He's had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 3 straight years of over 5.8 yards per carry, this back-to-back seasons of 16 rushing scores, and people like the receiving ability a lot. You've heard comparisons as high up from the stands to Alvin Kamara, other ones to guys like Tyjae Spears. Your thoughts on Devin Neal, another player who could gain some value this week?
He's way bigger than Tyjae Spears, but yeah. Devin Neal is the Senior Bowl was made for guys like him. he's going to go there. Like Theo, we're going to be talking about him in the stands of him being the standout. He's going to annihilate every single drill they throw at him. Whether it's the route running drills where he's one-on-one, he's going to make every linebacker there look silly. In pass pro, he's going to make every linebacker there look silly because he's going to lay them out. Because this dude, like, for all the praise he gets for the receiving chops, he's one of the most willing pass protectors I've ever seen. Now, footwork and hand placement's all sloppy, but he's willing. He'll stick his face in a fan. He'll go out there and wreck a dude. Love that about Devin Neal. So the Senior Bowl, he reminds me a little bit. I know you invoked the names you did. I'm going to go different angle. I'm going to go Brian Robinson, where it's like Brian Robinson was just this completely well-rounded, super solid back, goes down to Mobile and shows out because there wasn't a single drill he was bad at. It was like whatever the drill was, he nailed it. And he got, third-round capital. I think Neal could be in that same range for sure. But he's a very good player, and he's well-rounded. He can pretty much do everything.
One back who has a ton of hype right now is a player that's become sort of like a folk hero after Arizona State's loss to Texas in the college football playoffs. Arizona State had a dream season, and Cam Skattebo was the focal point of the offense. And it's a player where started out at Sacramento State, transfers up, goes to Arizona State, and then had this insane season this year. It was good last year, but this year he was really the touches are ridiculous. Had 293 carries, 1,700 rushing yards, 21 rushing scores, then adds 45 receptions, over 600 yards as a receiver. Also had a passing touchdown in back-to-back seasons. And at Sacramento State, they used him as a return man a little bit. So, like, this is a player where teams are continually trying to get the ball in his hands. He's got a lot of polarizing opinions about his potential as an NFL player, but he's certainly heading up with this sort of production at Arizona State. Your thoughts on Skattebo, Brett? And is he a pass catching back? Is he a change of pace back? Like, people are trying to make out what to think of this profile.
Yeah, I don't love Skattebo, but I do think he's a talented player. He's more shifty than he is fast. I think he's going to be very scheme dependent compared to a lot of the other backs in this class, where like if he lands in a scheme that's like an outside zone, like Houston's like off his radar. Like they can't draft, like it doesn't work. Miami off his, like, you know what I'm saying? There's just certain teams he just can't land in and make it work. He's shifty. He runs physical too. He runs hard for 215 pounds, really, really physical runner. So I think those are all good trades. This is such a loaded class though. I think in a normal year, maybe he gets the day 2 capital. I see him probably more as a 4th, 5th round pick.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think he'll be a 5th round pick, but I think he'll be one that people are somewhat excited about. The receiving is what I want to see. Like, can he dominate as a receiver in Mobile and have that niche that we can lean on? Certainly 293 carries is absolutely wild, though, to handle that sort of volume with that frame. So I'm interested to see him with everything. One player who I would argue has the most pressure on him of just about any running back in Mobile is Ollie Gordon. This is a player that if we were doing this a year ago, I would have been making arguments for Ollie Gordon like at the RB2 in this entire draft class. His 2023 season was epic. He had 1,700 rushing yards. He had 330 receiving yards. He had 22 touchdowns. Oklahoma State has a dream season, goes to the Big 12 championship game, loses to Texas there. But Ollie Gordon was like the talk of the town. This offseason had a DUI. And then this season, Oklahoma State was a disaster. Gordon goes down to 880 rushing yards, which was sort of like a win based on a team going with 3 wins. But he had 13 rushing scores, but the production certainly dipped. He's got that Braylon Allen type size where he's going to be 6'2", not quite as heavy as Allen, but he's like 220. Where are you at on Ollie Gordon? And would you agree that this has to be a big week for him?
Yeah, he's got to show out for sure. And I think some in the margins too, a little bit. It's not just as a runner. I think we know what he is as a runner. He's that Braylon Allen's a good comp. Braylon Allen, maybe a more little Tyler Algier, where he's going to stick his face in the fan and get after it. But as a pass catcher, as a pass protector, I think those things are important, And so I think he's got to win in the margins for sure. He's got to win coaches over. I don't know how they'll value the off-field stuff. We've seen the NFL be very inconsistent when it comes to this stuff. So I can almost not even factor it in my evaluation, unfortunately. But this is a big week for him for sure.
Yeah, that's one I definitely want to keep an eye on. And all of Brett's work, as well as a lot of my work, can be found at Fantasy Points. No better time to sign up. The early bird special is going to give you 20% off of any package you choose. Go check it out. We're going to be dropping of a ton of information that can help you get ready for the NFL draft, that can help you get ready for your dynasty rookie drafts heading in all the way into redraft season. Wide receiver is a position, Brett, where last year we saw Brian Thomas, we saw Malik Neighbors, Lad McConkey come in and score at an exceptionally high rate. Wide receivers keep making instant impacts as rookies. So this draft class is viewed as sort of a step down from 2024, which is fine. There's a couple of guys that are very, very well known, like Tet McMillan, Luther Burden, certainly Travis Hunter. But we have a lot of that next group in Mobile, guys who we think can rise up, potentially be first-round picks, and solidify their stock as day 2 picks. Let's start at the top with a guy that we both love, that we've talked about numerous times, Elic Ayomanor from Stanford. This is a Canadian, interesting profile, Canadian player, so there's not too many of them, ends up going to Stanford. And some of the schools that offered him out of high school, even you're talking about schools like Notre Dame, schools like Tennessee, were on the trail. He ends up going to Stanford, has played in relative anonymity, had the massive game against Travis Hunter where people sort of woke up and are like, this guy just put almost 300 receiving yards on Colorado. But it's been a guy who's continually made these highlight grabs, perfect body type, 6'2", 210. I know this is a guy that you are extremely high on.
I absolutely love him. I said this, I think, on your show last week. I don't see a world where he's not a first-round pick. I think he's that good. I'm planting my flag on it now. That might be bold, but this dude is a do-it-all X-type receiver. Literally anything you want, any skill you want, anything you desire in a wide receiver, he's got it, whether that's size, route running, yards after catch, contested catch ability. This dude is awesome. He has multiple techniques to beat press. And he did it at Stanford. And also, I shout out the Stanford wide receiver coach, Tyler Osborne. He's a phenomenal coach. He gets these guys ready to play. Think of Michael Wilson coming out, awesome route runner. And like Elic is a souped up version of Wilson. And Wilson's had a pretty solid career so far through 2 years. So really love what you're getting in Elic. And he should stand out. He should be the standout guy this week for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like if we're having to rank guys that we think are going to have a big week there, I think we would both put him up there. Michael Wilson, also a guy that made his name in Mobile, ends up being a 3rd-round pick. Ayomanor is way, way, way ahead of him. So really, really excited to see him in person. Another player who I'm very excited to see is Xavier Restrepo of Miami. And I think I would classify him as a true slot receiver. Had over 1,100 receiving yards this year, 11 touchdown scores, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Miami. This is a guy who is a polished route runner. Your thoughts on him and where you see him sort of NFL draft capital-wise and your expectations for Mobile?
Yeah, dudes like Restrepo go to the Senior Bowl and they just annihilate the one-on-one drills. It almost gets too much. Like I think of Calvin Austin a couple years ago. There's a dude Tank Dell. These guys just crush. I mean, it's the drills are designed for them to win, right? So I think he goes in, has a good week, and then we have to remember to balance the fact that they're one-on-one drills and they're designed for the wide receivers to win. But it's he's route running chops galore. You nailed it. Slot receiver. He's got some vertical upside, maybe occasionally as a Z or flanker receiver, but for sure a slot type guy, and he should stand out.
Yeah, that's one I know you're very, very high on. I really am looking forward to seeing him in person. About how, when you see him, do you think size is going to be a concern or not really with the slot profile?
No, he's built. What is he? 5'10", 5'11"? He's built well though. He looks thick. He's rocked up, muscular frame. Not too dissimilar from a Ricky Pearsall last year. I know Ricky did hit the 6-foot mark, but they're built very similarly.
One player who certainly is slight, and every year we're seeing a one, at least it seems like every single draft we're getting a skinny wide receiver that just jumps up draft boards, low BMI guy, but NFL teams seem less concerned about that. And that's a good thing for Tez Johnson. I think if this was 10 years ago, people would say, 165 pounds, not sure about him, standing up in the NFL. Last year, we certainly saw Xavier Worthy, a skinny guy, get drafted early, Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, so Tank Dell. We've seen it kind of time and time again. Tez Johnson is electric, and this is a player that has been really fun to watch at Oregon the last 2 years. Back-to-back seasons, 80-plus receiving yards. We had the 1,100 yard season attached to Bo Nix. This was actually an interesting story because he was like Bo Nix's friend, ends up transferring. I believe he played high school football with Nix, like very connections to Nix, ends up coming from Troy to Oregon and just exploding in production. Your thoughts on Tez Johnson, a really fun name to watch this week?
I don't think Tez touches the ground when he runs. This is like a Sindarin elf. He just glides over the turf. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah, and that's why the NFL doesn't care about weight so much anymore, is because the change of direction skills you get, the speed, it's just like, well, if you can't get hands on him, it doesn't matter how big he is, right? So, yeah, he's got to land in a scheme that's going to protect his size a little bit, but you've seen guys like that have tons of success recently. Not worried about that at all. He's another one where it's like one-on-one drills galore. He's just going to kill everyone.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him. I think he could be like, if we're searching for a guy where this could end up being like a buzz guy, I think he could end up being the buzz guy at the wide receiver spot. Certainly, Ayomanor and a couple of guys like that we expect to do well. But I think Tez Johnson, it's going to be okay. Everything correlates. He looks really good down here, and there'll be a little bit more buzz heading in the NFL draft. One player who I think is a little bit less known and a little bit under the radar, but you are extremely high on, is Jayden Higgins of Iowa State. He's got the alpha size. He's 6'3", 6'4". He's going to weigh north of 200 pounds. Had a big-time season this year at Iowa State. Last year, nearly 1,000 receiving yards. This year gets almost 1,200 and 9 touchdown catches. Your thoughts on Higgins, a big wide receiver, Brett?
Yeah, big prototype X kind of guy. For how big he is, his route running is insanely smooth. I like he was used inside and out as well. He's got nice proof of concept at both spots there. Body control and catch radius though too. I mentioned the route running, but man, there isn't a throw this guy can't get to. Just a ridiculous highlight reel of just really awesome catches, off target throws. Dealt with some less than savory QB play this year, so he made the most of it. Man, what a monster season!
Yeah, no, for sure. And the last wide receiver that I want to talk about, it seems like every single year we get a G5 guy who moves up draft boards. And both of these back-to-back players that I'll reference were in Mobile. Rashee Rice ends up going from SMU to the Kansas City Chiefs in the second round. And then last year, Malachi Corley ends up going from Western Kentucky to the New York Jets in the third round. So back-to-back years, G5 guy goes on day 2. This year, it feels like it could be Jalen Royals of Utah State. It's been sort of a buzz guy for well over a year, but it's certainly with Mountain West players, a big week in Mobile would go a long way, just because a lot of people just haven't seen him. But there's a lot of traits here we like as an NFL prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. His story is kind of crazy too, because he was like he went to a school smaller than Utah State, right? He transferred up to Utah State. I think he was at was it Georgia Military School or something? I mean, it was something crazy like that. So, his ascension is real, going from a really tiny school to a kind of a still small school in Utah State to now, being on the NFL draft radar. But yeah, the traits are there for sure. For him, this is a great week for him because he's going to see cornerback play at a level he has never seen in college before, at least not consistently. Obviously, you have games here and there, but if he can go out there and show out against, significantly upgraded competition, that's really where you start to change people's minds. That's what was, that was Rashee's thing. Rashee went to the Senior Bowl after not really playing any legit corners and just won consistently. So I think Royals can get on that radar. He's also prototype NFL size right now.
Yeah.
A lot of the top receivers on every team is 6'1", 195, 200. Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, they're all roughly the same size. Stephon Diggs. So he's right in that mold, kind of plays like those guys as well. Obviously, not to the same degree, but still, yeah, really fascinating prospect to watch this week or next week.
And he missed some time this season, but some of the numbers were just silly. He had over 200 receiving yards against Boise State. Certainly, Utah State lost that game, but really some big-time performances the last 2 years. So I'm really interested to see him miss some time to end the year. I think he'll regain some of that momentum he had earlier this year. And I think he could end up being another guy who goes on day two, kind of continuing this trend. The tight end position, we talked about the strength of the running back class. It's also a transformative year for tight ends. And my favorite tight end certainly in Mobile, and I know a guy that you are really, really high on as well, is Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. The stats are absolutely ridiculous. Led all players in targets this year. Led all college receivers in receptions with 117. Had 1,155 yards, or excuse me, 1,555 yards receiving at Bowling Green. And Brett, it's also what he did against the big schools. Completely shredded Penn State, completely shredded Texas A&M. This player is an absolute stud. Super excited to see Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of like a smaller Antonio Gates to an extent. Like he's very, very good route runner, great at the catch point. I mean, he clowned his level of competition, absolutely clowned him. So, he's another one where like I think he's awesome, but I want to see it against better comp, and we're going to get that opportunity. So, whether he's also a candidate to come play in the wide receiver drills, they'll do that for sure, at least on one day where he'll run with the tight ends mostly, but ultimately coaches are going to want to see like, hey, when he's got man against a really good corner, how's that look? And so they'll throw that out there, and we'll get to see that. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he responds to that.
Yeah, classic move tight end. I think that the draft capital, like probably he's a tight end 3 for many, tight end 4 for some. But I think a big week in Mobile, somebody might fall in love and make him like a top 40 pick in the NFL draft. And he's the kind of guy that we absolutely love for fantasy. We wouldn't call him a guy who's ever going to be a mauler at the next level. He is truly a move tight end, but we love those sort of guys. And Fannin Jr. can be an absolute matchup nightmare. Another player who I know you're extremely high on that had a very productive year at Texas is Gunnar Helm. Last year, Jatavian Sanders was the first pick in the 4th round of the Carolina Panthers coming out of Texas. This year, Helm took a massive step forward, 60 receptions, and this is playing alongside NFL caliber wide receivers and an NFL caliber running back. So he had a great deal of target competition and thrived with it. Does a ton with his yak ability, had the huge stiff arm on downs in Texas's playoff loss to Ohio State. Share your thoughts about Gunnar Helm and why you're excited about him as a prospect.
Yeah, Gunnar's a monster. I messaged our guy Scott Barrett about a year ago about him when I was doing Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and Jatavian Sanders tape, because he was sticking out. And it was crazy because he didn't produce a ton. But even despite that, he had moments where I was like, well, this is a dude. Like, we got to be watching for this guy next year. All year he impressed me, though. You mentioned the yak ability. That's his thing. He is a dude to bring down. Very tough tackle, tough out. But he's got legit speed. He can really stretch the seam. And that's kind of how Texas has used their tight ends. It's like, we're going to run the seam. And if you're going to play quarters defense, we're going to get that tight end on a two-way go. And we're going to make you pay for it. And Gunnar did that for sure. I look forward to this week because I don't know. He wasn't asked to do a lot of just straight route running. Everything was either vertical or yak. I want to see him go run some digs, some slants, see how he kind of moves in space and things of that nature. So it's a great week for him.
Yeah, and it's going to be a great week for us. We're both going to be in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. That's going to be a lot of fun. Again, stick with us here at Fantasy Points. We're going to be dropping videos like this all offseason long, getting you ready to win your fantasy leagues this season and get you ready for the NFL draft. We will see you soon.